Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Tonight's education is session 1 in a 2-part series, The Science of Nutrition and Weight Loss. And this is for health professionals. So it's presented by the University of Newcastle and facilitated proudly by Hunter New England Central Coast PHN. So the topic for this evening for session 1 is nutrition communication for health professionals. So my name is Charles Broadfoot. I'm one of the professional development officers with the PHN. And I'd like to firstly acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands in which we're all meeting tonight, pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also welcome all our Aboriginal friends and colleagues joining us online as well. So tonight's session is being recorded and it will become available on our website. So we do have a new URL. It's thephn.com.au and you can access this recording as well as previous recordings by clicking on the Education tab. So we will be using Slido tonight, so we'll be using it for polls, questions, as well as the final evaluation survey. So you can access the polls and the Q&A tabs of Slido on the right-hand side of your screen. Or alternatively, you can head to slido.com, so SLIDO, and enter the event code NWL1, so that's Nutrition Weight Loss 1. A third option is you'll see a little QR code that will pop up onto your screen. And that, if you scan that with a mobile device, that'll also take you to the polls and the Q&A tab. So please type your questions in throughout the session as they come up. We will have time for a panel discussion after the main presentation. So it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's speakers. So firstly, we have Laureate Professor Claire Collins. So Claire is the Director of Research for the School of Health Sciences and the Deputy Director of the Priority Research Centre for Physical Activity and Nutrition at the University of Newcastle. Secondly, we have Dr. Rebecca Haslam. So Rebecca is an early career postdoctoral nutrition researcher within the Priority Research Centre for Physical Activity and Nutrition at the University of Newcastle, and Claire is also a practicing dietitian. So that's all the housekeeping from me, so I'd like to hand over to Claire.
Thank you, Charles, and I'd like to thank the PHN for inviting us to give this presentation tonight. We're really excited to be here, and like Rebecca, I'm also an accredited practicing dietitian. So we're going to present to you tonight on the science of weight loss, and hopefully you'll see that we've provided a lot of very practical information. We're going to start with a short poll at the beginning of the presentation, and those 2 questions will be repeated on the end. So hopefully we'll all see if everybody who's online tonight has learnt a little bit. So Charles, I think you're going to launch those 2 polls. They're underway. The first one's up and you've just got 30 seconds to complete that. That one's closing now. And on average, you've scored a 3 out of the 5 possible for that first question. And the second poll is just launching now. And that's just closing. And most people have scored 2 to 3 around that. Okay, so let's get underway. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge all of the researchers and the funding bodies who support our research at the University of Newcastle. We have 3 learning outcomes for you tonight. The first is to understand the hierarchy of dietary advice that can be provided as part of weight management from the nutrition point of view. The second learning outcome, to prescribe the technology tools to support each level of the dietary weight management hierarchy. And the third one is to be aware of the evidence on the use of technology for personalised nutrition. And we've taken a little bit of a shortcut to show you what the key messages for each of those objectives are. So the take-home messages are that there is a hierarchy of evidence that can be provided to clients. And it's important that that energy restriction or that energy target that's set is titrated. And you'll see shortly how that varies from promoting the Australian dietary guidelines through to the most tight level of energy restriction target, which is called a VLED, or a very low energy diet, or a fasting diet. And that needs to be balanced between being able to adhere to it and how long you spend trying to support somebody at each of those energy restriction levels. The second goal, it's important to match the technology to client resources, ability and capacity. And the third goal, technology evolves, and it's really important that services are equitable in terms of cost, time, and empowering the client to be able to utilise those. So we're going to cover 4 key points tonight. Why talk about diet? Then we'll talk about the hierarchy, technology use, and then finish with some case studies. So why is it even worth talking about nutrition and technology? I'm sure you've heard all of these stats before, in that 1 in 4 children have overweight or obesity, 1 in 2 women, and 7 out of 10 men have overweight or obesity. Only 7 Australians out of 100 eat the recommended 2 serves of fruit and 5 serves of vegetables. And personally, I think all 7 of those are probably dietitians. So there's clearly a lot of work to be done in terms of improving nutrition. And you can ask, well, what's gone wrong? Like, how can it be that since the 1980s, having and carrying excess weight and having really poor eating patterns has become the norms? Well, I want to step back in time. So in the 1950s, when my mother was doing her grocery shopping, this is what a supermarket was like. You had to ask the grocer for things, who weighed and measured out. There wasn't much choice. About 500 products in your average supermarket. Now this is me and you doing supermarket shopping today. There's anywhere between 15 and 20,000 items to choose from. There's too much choice, and it's easy to choose wrong. And when we ask people about whether they eat healthily, I think we all know the politically correct answer to that. And people typically say, I think I eat pretty healthy usually. But what we know to be true is that people never have that usual day. There haven't been many studies looking at the change in energy intake over time. But this one done for the 10-year period between 83-85 to 1995 demonstrated an increase in energy intake. Now, why this is important is because the mid-80s were the time when we first saw packaged snacks like muesli bars arrive on the market, and when poppers first appeared. So if you look at that increase in energy intake just in that 10-year period without factoring the current average energy intake, for adults it increased by 3 to 4%. Doesn't sound like much, around 60 to 100 calories per day. But that's just one barista-style coffee. For children, the increase in that time period was quite marked, 11 to 15%, just 150 to 300 calories. Or I should say, that's a huge amount. 150 to 300 calories is 2 things in their lunchbox. It's a muesli bar and a popper, or 2 packaged snacks. And that in itself has been modelled to explain the obesity epidemic with those small changes. When you look at where does food intake that people eat, does it come from the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, those good old 5 food groups in the green, or does it come from the red foods, which is energy dense, nutrient poor, or plain language junk? And you can see when we measure that as proportions from the average Australian from the last National Nutrition Survey, 35%, more than a third of what we eat comes from discretionary, aka junk foods. So clearly there's a lot of work that can be done. This is the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, the Healthy Eating Plate. This is actually our national food promotion system. So underneath any dietary recommendation you make, if we could just get people to eat more of the good old-fashioned 5 food groups, we'd be improving their nutrient intake, so the B vitamins, the iron, the zinc, the calcium, that's found in all of these foods, their fibre intake, and we'd be automatically reducing the junk food. Can you see the red circle down the bottom? That's the discretionary choices. The Australian dietary guidelines say, have these sometimes and in small amounts. Personally, I think that should say, rarely have these, if at all. And when you drill down to which are the main culprits in that red food group, you can see that alcohol comes out number one, followed by the cakes, the confectionery, the pastries, and so on. I think what stands out to me in that is that it's a little bit too much across a whole diverse range of discretionary choices. That morph from 500 foods to 15,000 in the supermarket, we are having a little bit of all of those sometimes, and that is problematic. So what's going on? How did this happen? How did we get caught out? Surely there's some sleight of hand underway. Well, yes, there is clever marketing, but we also know that plate size has increased over this period of time. And if you don't believe me, go and talk to your grandparents and see if they still have any plates left from the dinner set they got for their wedding. And what you'll see is that plate sizes have doubled. So what was considered a normal portion size of fish fingers way back in the 1950s has almost doubled in size. Research shows that when you offer people a plate of food, they eat roughly the same percentage of that plate, but report exactly the same level of fullness and satisfaction. So shrinking your plate is one of the first useful things. This slide is a whole day's food intake, around 2,000 calories or 8,000 kilojoules, and it's actually not a perfect day's meal. You'll see there's a glass of wine, there's a glass of soft drink, there's a couple of cookies. What were they thinking? Yet it's quite a big volume of food. But take a look at this. Each of these 3 snacks individually contains 2,000 calories or 8,000 kilojoules. So you can immediately see why you interview someone and they go, I can't understand why my weight's going up. I don't even eat breakfast. I do grab a coffee at the barista, maybe I get a slice of cake. I'm on the road, so I just grab a quick drive-through lunch. It's not that big. And I go to the club a couple of times a week, but I have a side salad and I only have 1 glass of wine. So you can see how the extra kilojoules sneak into people's day. And so in fact, gaining weight really has snuck up on them. And then when you factor in all the food promotion through the computer, online delivery, Uber Eats and on, food is pushed at us constantly. We're also online constantly. 88% of Australians own a smartphone, so it's no trouble to order your Uber Eats. 35% of us are checking their mobile phones within 5 minutes of waking up. And put your hands up if that's you, and I fess up, that's me too. So we live with these technologies, but we do need to learn how to make them work for us. On Instagram, 85% of images are of food. Most of them are not of healthy food. And people absolutely love taking photos of their food. So let's talk about how to harness some of that a bit later on with some of the tools we'll recommend. So rest assured, we used to have NHMRC guidelines for the management of overweight. They're currently rescinded, and COVID has got in the way of the revised obesity strategy, but that should be coming out last year. But the current evidence that exists is actually still legitimate. It's just that the research evidence needs a bit of updating. So what the bottom line is in these graded evidence statements, that's where they look at the quality and the volume of evidence and what it says. Some of the bottom line statements that are supported is that when a patient is ready to attempt weight loss, aim for a 10% weight loss initially. So someone who's 100 kilos, set a target of 90 kilos, and know that if in 1 to 2 years' time they have not bounced back by more than half of that, so they've kept off 5%, so your patient or client who was 100 kilos was able to reduce weight to 90 kilos and now they're 95 kilos, they've still reduced their risk of developing type 2 diabetes by almost 60%. Major studies around the world confirm this. So we need to be realistic in supporting that level of success. It's not about getting down to the magic dress size or trouser size. It's about changing your lifestyle from one of weight gain, which is the pattern for many Australians, to maintaining a small weight loss over time. We know that keeping off 5% improves health-related quality of life and it reduces medication needs. And so to achieve that type of maintenance of lost weight, you need to reduce your energy intake by around 2,500 kilojoules per day. Roughly, we can round that up to 500 calories. Medical nutrition therapy is a term you hear dietitians use, and medical nutrition therapy means going on a diet with support from a dietitian. So there's a quick takeaway, refer to dietitians. We like to use this hierarchy. Can you see the red and green line? The red line pointing down is the journey from a minor level of energy restriction, if you try and follow that recommendation, through to quite a severe energy restriction. And the green arrow is adherence. The less the energy restriction, theoretically, the easier it is to stick to recommendations aligned with that. So after the, I'll just skip on to the next slide. So the first level of energy restriction is the Australian Dietary Guidelines. The second level of energy restriction is what we call a reduced energy diet. And this is where you try and identify patterns in someone's eating habits that if they made a swap, you could make those kilojoules disappear. The easiest way to explain that is the person who's drinking 6 cans of Coca-Cola or 6 cans of soft drink a day. If you switch that to diet soft drink, you do lose those roughly 500 calories per day. An LED, a low energy diet, this is a type of diet where there is a daily energy intake target, like 5,000 kilojoules, 6,000, 7,000. And most of the weight loss programs out there use an LED approach. And a VLED, this is where you're, as a VLED, a very low energy diet, you're replacing all meals with formulated meal replacement drinks, usually accompanied by salad and a small amount of oil. So the key message is that using varying levels of energy restriction, but this can change over time. If you see a client on any level of energy restriction and they say, wow, it's actually getting a bit too hard, the goal would be to drop them to a less severe energy restriction. What we see is that people try any old diet out of this hierarchy and go, well, that was way too hard. Clearly, I can't follow diets. They're very rarely moved along those graded energy restrictions. So what's out there that matches those energy restrictions? If you look in the left-hand column for the dietary strategy, we then have a description and we then have what the energy intake target is. A lot of this is what I just summarised. How hard it may be, and then where you can find more information. In the read more, each of those corresponds to an article we've previously written on the free online newspaper called The Conversation, and we'll send those links around in the handout that will come out through the PHN to you after this. So there we go for the reduced energy diet, looking for ways to make some key swap strategies, as I said, to reduce anywhere between 2,000 to 4,000, depending on what the habit you're replacing. So I'll just move on. So now I'm just going to take you through each one of those levels of energy restriction in a little more detail before we move on to the case studies. So some of the tools that are out there to support following the Australian Dietary Guidelines. On the Eat for Health, which is the government website, there is a calculator that allows you to put in your personal details and come up with rough serves per day of each of those basic 5 food groups. We created the free Healthy Eating Quiz, which is currently linked to some of the health pathways, where people can get a brief assessment of their overall diet quality. It's free and they'll get some brief feedback. There is a free app called the Food Switch, which is designed to be used at the supermarket, where you're going to purchase one product, you scan the barcode, and it'll actually tell you what a healthier product. You need to do that when you've got a bit more time. And then things like self-monitoring Wi-Fi scales, which you can buy cheap in shops like Target. And then self-monitoring tools like Fitbits or any of the watches that measure steps. So this is the diet quality tool, the healthy eating quiz, and this is just to show you all of our research that underpins it. This is what the website looks like when you go to it. And as I mentioned, that will come around in your handout. So for the reduced energy diet, some of the free apps that are out there is Easy Diet Diary. We tend to recommend this one. One, because it's free. Two, because it uses an Australian database of foods underneath. And three, somebody who uses that, who then gets referred to a dietitian, they can export their food record to their accredited practicing dietitian, and that can be used in the consult. Calorie King is another free self-monitoring website. New South Wales Health has the 87000 website with great resources, and then the Live Lighter program actually has a swap tool for snacks, and then there are some other posters there. There are a whole range of alcohol intake audit tools. We tend to use this tool, the Australian Eating Survey. This is not free. We use it in research, even though we do sell it to people who are wanting to use it. What it does, it's a food frequency questionnaire. It breaks people's food intake down into all of those subcategories and shows them where their energy intake is coming from. It gives them a score. It shows them their nutrient intakes as well. Then with the low energy diet, as I mentioned earlier, these are the prescribed meal plans. They can be used as a home delivery diet. There's a lot of companies doing home delivery kilojoule monitored dietary intakes. They can be a useful strategy for the client who says, you know what, I actually cannot lose weight. I'm sure I cannot lose weight. Well, if you use a home delivery diet service for a week, then that is a way a person can self-evaluate whether it's actually some of these other portion size tools, these portion size issues that may have been getting in the way of them being able to monitor kilojoules. And then last but not least, the VLED. Rebecca will come back to this in the case studies. This should not be used without medical and nutrition support. We believe that this is for your clients where you are trying to support diabetes, type 2 diabetes come down to control, or to prevent type 2 diabetes, or it's commonly used pre-surgery, for example, bariatric surgery. So our professional body has listed all of the aspects of fad-free diets, and we've utilised some of those by writing articles, as I mentioned, for the conversation. This is a free newspaper, so if you want quality diet information, just go there and punch in the word diet, or you can punch in my name and you'll see all of these articles we've previously written. And then just a call out for our free course that's underway at the moment called The Science of Weight Loss, Dispelling Diet Myths. It's suitable for any health professionals who want to know more about nutrition. So then in terms of technology, this is something we specialise in. These are all the technology tools that we've invented and all the programs that we use in. So we might come back to you when we're recruiting for some of these studies. But what we can tell you from the research evidence, when we went and looked at the literature to say, what does it support using right now in terms of research? Well, bathroom scales with a body fat percentage. Again, like I said, you can buy these in Target for less than $50. And you can Bluetooth that to an app for self-monitoring. The main evidence for that is in adult males, and males who monitor their weight using scales have greater weight loss at 2 years. Fitbit, wrist worn, there's greater weight loss up to 6 months in people who use a Fitbit tool for monitoring their steps, their physical activity. And across all of the internet and e-health programs, the evidence is mostly supportive for women. E-health is better than no treatment, than not intervening. That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Doing something is better than doing nothing. And extra features work better than a basic program. And then in terms of IT interventions, getting personalised feedback leads to greater waste reduction and a greater number of people who are achieving that magic 5% weight loss. And those personalised interventions, that's what dietitians do. We can provide those in medical nutrition therapy. Now I'm just going to hand over to Rebecca to present the case studies.
Okay, thanks Claire. So I'll just spend the last 15-20 minutes or so before the Q&A going through some case studies, just so you can see how a lot of Claire's information can actually apply to real life patients. So before I move into each of the case studies, just touching on a few of the key considerations that we take into account when we're trying to decide the most appropriate dietary approach for weight management. So we usually assess the degree of overweight or obesity. So for example, if there's a need for rapid weight loss, if we have a patient that is considering bariatric surgery, then we might go for a more restrictive approach like a VLED. If we have a patient whose BMI is only just above the healthy weight range, then we might go for a less restrictive approach. If our patient has existing comorbidities as well as overweight and obesity, then we're going to be looking for a strategy that has weight loss as a goal and perhaps a more restrictive approach. We always take into consideration dietary preferences of the individual, but also their family as well. So we know that if we can't actually get someone to eat the foods that we're recommending, then we've got no chance of them seeing progress and getting success with our strategies. We also want to assess the individual's motivation to change. So if they're not motivated, it's unlikely we're going to be able to get them to follow a VLED. We also want to look at previous weight loss attempts. So we know what they have tried in the past influences their confidence to be able to make changes from now on in. And then we also want to look at their current nutrition knowledge. So if they don't have the basic knowledge, if they don't know about the 5 food groups in the Australian Dietary Guidelines, then we're going to start with a fairly basic, less restrictive approach. So we're going to start with Sean. So Sean is a 43-year-old male. He has poor eating habits, he's been gaining weight, and his BMI is currently 27. He's got high blood pressure and a family history of type 2 diabetes. He's made no previous attempt to eat better or reduce weight, and he has limited knowledge of food and nutrition. The good news is that he has a smartphone and he's willing to buy some Wi-Fi scales. So I'll give you a quick 10 seconds to have a think back to Claire's hierarchy of nutrition approaches. What approach is going to be best suited for Sean with his current situation? So the approach that we're going to take is following the Australian Dietary Guidelines. So we know with the Australian Dietary Guidelines that the adherence is more likely to be high because the energy restriction is low. So it's a lot easier for Sean to follow this approach. The reasons we've selected this approach is because Sean hasn't made any previous attempts to eat better or lose weight before. So if we can get him to reach those goals by taking a lesser restrictive approach, then that's going to be a better option. And he's got limited knowledge of food and nutrition. So we really want to start basic, and we want to be educating him on the Australian Dietary Guidelines. So first we can send Sean to the Eat for Health website. So the Eat for Health website houses all of our resources for the Australian Dietary Guidelines, and that includes the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating. The Eat for Health calculator is also on the Eat for Health website, and it can help Sean determine how many serves of each of the food groups he needs to be eating each day. But because we don't want to be making things too overwhelming for Sean, we're going to send him to the healthy eating quiz as well. So we'll get Sean to do the 5-minute online healthy eating quiz, and this will come back with a report to tell him of the 5 core food groups, which ones are the priorities that we need to be focusing on first. So it might come back that Sean needs to work more on increasing his fruits and vegetables, so we'll set some goals around improving his intake of fruits and vegetables first. And then we'll get Sean to monitor his weight weekly, We'll get him to use the Wi-Fi scales along with the app so that it can track that data, and then next time we're seeing Sean, then he can show us that data and we can see how he's progressed over time. So the most important thing with this level of restriction, so with the Australian Dietary Guidelines, the purpose is more about improving diet quality. We don't necessarily need to have a weight loss goal or too much of an energy restriction. We tend to get an energy restriction because our patients following these are making better food choices and they're eating less junk food. But the diet quality is the focus of this. So when we review Sean, so thinking back to what Claire was covering as well, we know that we're wanting to titrate patients along this scale of dietary approaches. So if Sean is doing really well on this level, then we don't need to move him anywhere. We can maintain him at this current level. But if we're not seeing the results that we're after, then we might be looking to move Sean down to a reduced energy diet, and we can assess that in a review. So keeping in mind that anywhere along this scale, it's suitable to be recommending patients to see an accredited practicing dietitian, because along with any of these nutrition suggestions, we're always working with changing behaviours as well, and that's worth seeing an APD for. So our second case study is Brad. So Brad is a 54-year-old male. He's got poor eating habits. He's got a BMI of 29, so you can see that his BMI is slightly higher than Sean's was, and he's got increased LFTs. He's got some knowledge of food groups, but he's tried strict diets in the past and they just didn't work. And Brad has a goal of weight loss. And again, we're lucky because Brad, he owns a smartphone, a computer and an iPad and Fitbit, so we can build some technology support into his intervention. So for Brad, we've selected the reduced energy diet. So again, he's got some basic knowledge of food groups, so we could progress beyond just the basic Australian Dietary Guidelines. But he's tried strict diets in the past and they didn't work. So we didn't want to go to anything stricter than an RED to start with. So the reduced energy diet, again, we're looking at restricting cutting out 2,000 to 4,000 kilojoules per day. So the easiest way that we can do that is using an app called Easy Diet Diary. So Brad can use Easy Diet Diary to track all of his food and beverage intake, and this can help him to identify some alternatives that are going to be lower in kilojoules. So often for people, simply keeping the diary is enough for them to really find out areas of their diet that they can improve. But the benefit, as Claire mentioned, is that Easy Diet Diary can also be sent to health professionals, and then if Brad's having trouble identifying these key areas for change, then health professionals can assist him with that. The next step with Brad will also to educate him on managing his portion sizes. So more often than not, simply reducing portions will be enough to cut 2,000 kilojoules in a day. So if we use the healthy eating plate, we're going to educate Brad to have half his plate as vegetables and the other a quarter as protein and as a quarter as the carbohydrate serves. We'll also direct Brad to the 8700.com website. So this will educate him a little bit more about kilojoules, how many kilojoules he needs in a day, and then also how many kilojoules are burned doing different activities. And lastly, we'll get Brad to monitor his alcohol intake. So there's a couple of suitable apps that can be used. So the Drinks Meter is a New South Wales government app, and it helps to track alcohol intake. And Daybreak is from Hello Sunday Morning, which is also an Australian government initiative. And it helps to work with people and change their behaviours around alcohol intake. So you can see with the reduced energy diet, we're just making simple swaps. So we might be switching from full strength Coke to diet Coke and making really simple swaps like that. So when we review with Brad, again, we're going to see whether we want to keep him at the reduced energy diet level. If he's progressed really well and already met his weight loss goal, then we may shift him up to the Australian Dietary Guidelines for maintenance. Or if he hasn't progressed as well, then we may move him down to a low energy diet to get some more results with his weight loss. So next we have Sue, who's a 51-year-old female with a BMI of 31, currently going through menopause. She's had previous attempts to diet, but she's never attempted a really restrictive diet. She's got some knowledge of food groups and kilojoules. Her weight is now affecting her health and well-being. So the option that we've chosen for Sue is a low-energy diet. She's never tried something this restrictive before, so it's likely that she's willing to give this a go. Her motivation is high because she knows that her weight is affecting her health and well-being. So if her motivation is driven by that, she's more likely to be able to stick to this because we have a medium to high energy restriction on a low-energy diet. So a low-energy diet only delivers around 4,200 to 5,000 kilojoules per day. So firstly, we want Sue to self-monitor her diet, steps, her weight, waist circumference, and her sleep. So again, that will help to identify perhaps some other lifestyle behaviours that Sue wants to be working on as well. As the low-energy diet is a little more restrictive, we tend to then be a little more prescriptive with the plans that we offer. So something like Light and Easy, which is pre-prepared meals that are set to specific kilojoule targets, might be an option for Sue for a couple of week trial period. So we might start Sue off with a 2-week trial, and then we might switch her to a web-based program that allows her, still provides her with a kilojoule restriction plan, tells her what the meals and snacks are that she can have each day, but she's actually got to prepare those meals for herself. Or the final option that we could offer Sue is to DIY and use Calorie King online. So it's another tracker, it's an online tracker similar to Easy Diet Diary. You can do it through their website and you simply enter in all of your foods and beverages. And again, we can advise Sue to keep within a specific kilojoule limit while she's tracking her intake. So we'll review Sue again, and again we'll titrate up and down depending on Sue's progress over time. So lastly, we've got Ben. So Ben is a 54-year-old male with a BMI of 42. So we can see that Ben has the highest BMI of our case studies so far. He always seems to be on a diet, and his weight is seriously impacting on his health. He's got type 2 diabetes. He's considering bariatric surgery. So we know that the support that we're going to offer is going to require medical and dietetic support, because we have selected a VLED for Ben to follow. So again, the reasons for that is he's got comorbidities, his weight is seriously impacting on his health, he's considering bariatric surgery, so we need a more intensive intervention with Ben. It's really important that no one starts a VLED without that medical and dietetic support. We certainly need to be educating patients on the contraindications of following some VLEDs and potentially doing some extra screening. So for a VLED, we're looking at around 1,800 to 2,500 kilojoules per day. So you can see that it's quite restrictive, which is why the VLEDs come in formulated meal replacements. So there are a lot of options on the market for formulated meal replacements. Our advice is to choose the product that offers online support as well. So something like OptiFast offers online support. It offers training for health professionals in how to best deliver OptiFast and support their patients using OptiFast as well, and also educates patients along the way and teaches them how to step down through the different levels of the OptiFast VLED program. So again, we'll be getting Ben to monitor his weight over time, and then we'll be using that in review to be checking his progress. The support that Ben will need, the reviews that he will need, will be more frequent because we've got him on such a restrictive diet. We need to be seeing him more frequently to make sure everything is going to plan. So again, we're going to review Ben in time. If he hasn't already, we're going to be referring him to an accredited practicing dietitian. So coming towards the end, Claire mentioned before the NHMRC guidelines for weight management. So the 5 A's are essentially a step-by-step guide of how you can progress through an intervention with patients for weight management, and there's 5 key steps. So the first 2 steps are we want to ask and assess. So essentially the ask and assess are our information gathering steps. So first we want to ask permission to discuss their weight management. We want to assess current health status, so that can be BMI, waist circumference, clinical markers and other comorbidities. We want to be looking at previous diet and weight management attempts, readiness to change, and barriers and facilitators to change. So collecting this information before we start ensures that we can select an appropriate nutrition strategy that suits the patient's needs. The next step is to advise. So we want to educate our patients on the benefits of improving diet quality and weight loss, and also the benefits of using technology for self-monitoring. We know that it can be really difficult to adhere to a lot of programs, and technology can certainly help patients with that adherence, and also provides that feedback mechanism on how they're actually progressing over time. We want to assist them, so we need to support them to manage their weight, because it's very difficult for them to do this on their own. Besides creating the energy deficit, we need to support them with behaviour change. And we also want to support them in selecting appropriate technology tools to eat better and manage their weight. And finally, the last step is to arrange follow-up to review their progress. So once we're reviewing them, we're looking at whether the tools that we've selected are appropriate. We're looking at whether the level of kilojoule restriction has been appropriate. Do we need to titrate up or down depending on how they're progressing? Of course, we're referring to a dietitian, and overall we want to be evaluating their ongoing nutritional and weight status over the longer term. So in summary, improving nutrition is key to improving well-being and achieving a healthy weight for life. We need to be asking patients about technology use to help them support better nutrition and weight management. We want to move patients up and down the dietary advice medical nutrition therapy hierarchy, use technology tools to help achieve medical nutrition therapy goals, and of course technology can be used to improve access for those that are willing and able to use IT. So thank you for listening to the presentation so far. Claire and I are going to move to the Q&A panel now.
Thanks everyone for listening. You've got plenty of time to post questions, and we'll do our best to get through some of your questions. Rebecca's just going to have a quick look at those. So I hope you've seen that what we're trying to show you is that there are plenty of options when you're meeting with patients and discussing weight management. Beck, have any questions come through?
Yes, we've got a couple of questions, Claire. So I think you will, I'll hand this first question to you. So what does the current evidence say about saturated fat?
Okay, well, if you have a look at the Heart Foundation website, and the evidence is still that high intakes of saturated fat do actually increase your blood cholesterol level and increase your risk for heart disease. But I think what's more important to know is that the Heart Foundation have moved from nutrient, macronutrient-based recommendations to food-based guidelines. And those food-based guidelines include things like promotion of vegetables and fruit, promotion of a diverse range of whole grains, all things that are naturally lower in saturated fat. It's pretty hard to monitor single nutrients. It's much easier to monitor dietary patterns. And so definitely if you're trying to update yourself around recommendations for heart health, then go and have a look at the health professional section of the Heart Foundation website.
And we know, Claire, don't we, that the foods that are typically high in saturated fat are our junk foods and our processed packaged foods, our processed meats, and we know that there's other reasons beyond saturated fat that these products aren't ideal for health.
Yes, definitely, Beck. It's interesting. It's like the trinity. Sugar, fat and salt all hang out in the same ultra-processed foods. And in fact, in terms of terminology now, people are speaking much more about ultra-processed foods as a way of categorising the most damaging to your health of the processed food groups. Probably the other interesting thing, while we're waiting for some more questions to come through, is sometimes people go, oh, but I've read all about that, you know, the saturated fat in milk is fine. Well, if you do have a look at the evidence review for the Heart Foundation, you'll see that dairy fats, it's true, they do act differently to saturated fats that are found in meat or some of the fat sources that are higher in saturated fat. But the Heart Foundation still recommends reduced fat dairy, and it's mainly because they're much lower in kilojoules when you use the reduced fat versions of the dairy products. And for, as we've seen with those stats, for the average Australian, most Australians are battling this year-on small weight gain.
So we've got some more questions coming through. So which web-based 10 to 12 week programs do you recommend? So I know the Live Lighter program is a really good program, and it's a 12-week program that you can sign up for, and they provide you a kilojoule restricted meal plan.
That's from Western Australian Health, isn't it? Does that have a cost?
No, so that's free.
Okay.
So that's definitely one that I've recommended to patients before.
Yeah.
So just signing up for a free account online, you just enter some basic details about your height, weight, age, and a few other health-related questions.
Well, that's great to know.
And then you get the
free.
plan straight away.
Yeah.
Yep.
And one of the other things that's coming within the PHN, so the Primary Health Network, some of the practices may have been involved in their trial of the PHN's very own online weight management program, and so that is going to be rolled out over time. But one of the things I would say is, you know, if you're seeing patients or clients and they've tried an online program, please reinforce that small amount of weight change and any improvement in their health variables. And no matter what type of diet they may have tried when they come to see you or you raise the issue of weight management, if the going is going tough, if it's getting tough for your patients and clients, please refer them to that personalised support and that ability to contextualise it individually that dietitians can provide. You know, we're not prudes and saying, oh no, you followed some fad diet. We can actually help people recognise what's worked well and how to build on any successes they've had previously.
Yeah, and dietitians can as well help with kilojoule restricted plans as well, and offer that ongoing support and behaviour support as well at the same time.
Well, we're definitely not a one size fits all, which is why it's a good idea to use our profession.
Okay, so I know I'm a little overweight and my BMI is in the obese category. My doctor says that my blood sugars are okay. Am I still at risk?
That's an interesting question, and I looked at that recently. Rebecca and I just wrote an article for The Conversation about COVID kilos, and we know that a lot of people are feeling a bit down on themselves because their weight's gone up during the coronavirus lockdowns. Well, we were trying to support people to not focus on any weight gain that's happened during that period of time, but focus on their healthy eating patterns. So when you look at some of the very large cohort studies, now these aren't interventions, they're observational, but in the USA, for example, they followed, it was something like over 200,000 adults for about 30 years. And what they found in that study was that people who had healthy diet patterns lived longer and were less likely to get heart disease or any chronic disease compared to people who had poor diet quality or poor dietary patterns, independent of body weight. Similar results were actually found in a Swedish cohort. They only followed them for 20 years and it was only 70,000. But that same message, it's much more important to focus on your diet quality, and people do not eat vegetables and fruit. So trying to build the variety and the volume of vegetables and fruit and also whole grains, and then the weight tends to follow, but the health gain may come much before you see the weight change. So that's a really important message that we want to give.
Yeah.
Please always come back to promoting healthy eating patterns. Would you agree, Beck?
Yeah, absolutely. And in practice, I guess BMI is just one piece of the puzzle. We always evaluate waist circumference, measure waist circumference as well, which often for some people can be a better predictor of health status or disease risk as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. BMI is really only a population screening tool. It's not necessarily useful at the level of the individual. So it might help identify who may be at risk, but abdominal adiposity, which waist circumference, is actually a better risk prediction for health.
Is intermittent fasting effective and safe?
Now, that is an excellent question because we've already written an article on that for the conversation, so we'll send you there for more information. We do dive into that topic in the Science of Weight Loss, that free online course I mentioned. But there is actually evidence in support of a range of the fasting approaches, whether it's alternate day fasting or it's 5-2. In a 5-2, you essentially follow a VLED just 2 days a week. There is evidence for that. But there are studies where they show when you put like a 5-2 or an alternate day fast up against gradual everyday weight management program, the weight loss is about the same. So it's really horses for courses. You can be the tortoise or you can be the hare and you can actually get to the same result. Or you can be a tortoise for a little while and then a hare. It doesn't really matter, and that's why the personalisation element is actually very practical. I think one of the key things we've seen, Beck, and you can talk from your point of view of people that you've put through these regimes, is that, with the fasting approaches, for some people because let's face it, being on a diet is really hard. So for some people, compressing all the kilojoule restriction into 2 days a week, what would your clinical experience be?
Yeah, one of the first things that I ask clients when they come to me and ask about intermittent fasting is, do you feel like you can stick to something that either is really restrictive on 2 days of the week or for certain times of the day? And if they say, oh no, that sounds like the worst thing in the world, then we do not go with intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
Other people think that it fits perfectly with their lifestyle because of the work that they do, or because it allows them more freedom or flexibility on weekends. So again, it always comes back to what's going to be realistic for the individual and what they feel like they can stick to.
And Beck, of the people that you've utilised fasting approaches for, what proportion would you say then, move to an LED or more like the Australian Dietary Guidelines approach?
Yeah, we definitely find that most of them, they don't want to stick to the intermittent fasting over the longer term. It's a short-term plan
like a
for
kickstart,
them, like a kickstart. And they do get good results to start off with. But we're essentially there assisting them transitioning back and working out how they can then get back to normal ways of eating that doesn't include so much restriction. I remember the documentary we did, Claire, where we put the couples on the different diets, and one of the couples we put on intermittent fasting, and they did extremely well. They lost a lot of weight. They just weren't sure whether they were going to be able to stick to it.
Yeah,
over the longer term.
That's understandable. So I think the key thing then is about follow-up, and I think you would have seen in the case studies, Rebecca, really emphasising the need for reviewing patients, and that's an important strategy. It's not a one-off, You don't take one course of blood pressure medication and expect to have perfect blood pressure for the rest of your life. So, encouraging people to come back and meet with their accredited practicing dietitian again is always a good strategy.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got weight gain is problematic when associated with antipsychotic and antidepressant medications. Are the strategies needed different?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I know that one of the research studies in planning by one of our colleagues is specifically for people on like antipsychotics. Unfortunately, some of those medications do make you hyperphagic, and and rapid excessive weight gain can of itself contribute to adverse mental health. So it's really about titrating the medications. But I think we can't underestimate, if someone's been made hyperphagic, it's going to be impossible for them to keep their weight down at the same time. The main strategy would be improving diet quality and trying to manage the hyperphagia as the best you can, and then reviewing as soon as they're able to have their medications titrated. So I think liaising with the mental health team is really essential in promoting the best outcomes. I think I got tongue-tied, outcomes long term, but also we can certainly send out through the PHN once that trial is up and recruiting people in that particular category.
And in my experience, the dietary strategies are pretty similar, but it's the extra behavioural support that they need. They need strategies for boredom eating. They need strategies for just that ravenous hunger when they know that they've already eaten a lot for the day. So it's more those supportive strategies that we're working more with, whereas the nutritional strategies are quite similar to what we would typically use.
Yeah.
Okay, bariatric surgery is being heavily pushed as more surgeons gain the skills and experience. Putting aside hype and perceived instant cure, does it have a place?
Oh, definitely. Like it's just a shame that the government does not support more being conducted in public hospitals. If you look at the evidence long term, and I'm talking now about 10 and 15-year outcomes, the evidence is really strong in support of bariatric surgery as the only strategy with those very long-term improvements in weight-related health. And so, I think we will see that increase over time. Like eventually, I think the government will actually have to create more spaces for bariatric surgery within public hospitals. Like the majority of it is actually done in private hospitals. But I think the really key thing is when you're referring patients for consideration, make sure they go to one of the programs that have the dietetic component included, and that's really essential. So one of our PhD candidates is about to complete, and she did her PhD on people who've had bariatric surgery, and what that showed is that many people have not had a lot of nutrition support, and they do have ongoing problems after. So they need their dietetic care as part of that before and part of that after. I mean, that's a topic where you could have a whole evening on bariatric surgery, and we can suggest that to the PHN.
Yeah. So we may have come to the end of questions. If there's one or two more that quickly come through, we might get time to answer those.
Well, while we're waiting to see if there's any other questions that have come through, again, I think I'm just going to keep promoting the science of weight loss. So 60,000 people have done our free MOOC. You only pay if you want a verified certificate, but it goes for 6 weeks. And what we tried to put in that course is everything that's in a dietitian's head that we essentially wish we could tell everybody. And so we do through the MOOC, but that you wish you could tell every patient you see in your clinic, for example. But people get the opportunity to pitch questions as well. And so it's not actually pitched as a weight loss course. It's actually pitched at people like you. You're working with people who are trying to manage their weight, and you wish you understood more about weight management in the long term. So the science of weight loss, it's on the edX platform, and you'll recognise it because there's a picture of us on the and the enrolment.
Yes. So it's already started last week, but you can enrol any time for the next 4 weeks, which will leave you about a week to get through 6 weeks worth of
Actually,
content.
Rebecca, we should give a plug for the fact that we are also doing an evaluation of that. So if you not only want to participate in that course, but you'd be happy to fill in a pre-post evaluation questionnaire, then just send us an email to UON, that stands for the University of Newcastle, Nutrition, one word, UON Nutrition @newcastle.edu.au.
How are we going for time?
Okay, so we've got time for one more question there. Rebecca, will make it a good one.
It's a good one.
It's a good one.
Would a government tax on sugary drinks be a good thing?
I personally think it would be a great thing, but it's not the only thing.
Yeah.
Like that may go a way to changing people's food habits. It may go a way to preventing some obesity, but let's face it, 25% of children, 50% of women, and 70% of men. And for many of those, it's affecting their weight-related health and their nutrition-related health. So it won't be enough. You know, it would be great to see it might create some more money to create programs to support people, but, you know, like people don't get access to the support they need, and there's a big assumption that, well, everybody must already know what to do, and people have no idea what to do and rarely get referred. So now here's a really sad statistic for you. So I was looking up the Medicare data, and of the Medicare referrals to allied health, less than 1% actually go to dietitians. So, you know, I'm going to wave the flag for my profession and say, please refer people who you feel would benefit from improving their nutrition-related health with or without the weight management. And what do you think, Beck, about a sugar tax?
Yeah, definitely. But the only thing I was going to add to your response was thinking back to your list of all of the discretionary choices contributing to our energy intake, and sugary drinks contributed only just a small amount. There was a really, really long list there of other things that were contributing. So yes, whilst it would be beneficial, and hopefully the money generated from that would go back into health support and programs, there's still a lot of other things that we need to be working on.
Now, I believe we're at time, so I think the poll is going to be quickly reposted. The first poll is up there. We're probably just about at the end of that poll.
Oh,
We're at the end of that poll, Beck?
We've gone up to a 4, 3 to a 4.
There we go. You've jumped a whole point in that first question. The second poll, if we can put that up. We're almost to the end of that poll. I think they're just closing that one now.
Yep. So last time we were jumping between a 2 and a 3. We're a definite 4 this time.
There we go.
Wow.
There we go. Good on you.
Well done.
Isn't it amazing what a difference a webinar can make? So now you're going to be sent the final evaluation poll, I believe. And I believe we will be sending to the PHN a short excerpt of the presentation for you to use in your practice. So thank you for inviting us.
Thank you very much to both Claire and Rebecca for joining us and, you know, generously giving your time. That was fantastic. I learned a lot from it, and the panel discussion as well. Thank you for sending in your questions via Slido. We really value your input and your interaction with our education. So as Claire mentioned, you'll see now in the polls tab there is an evaluation survey. If you could just take 30 seconds to quickly fill that out, we really appreciate and value your feedback. We always want to improve on the way we deliver education. So this is session 1 of 2, as I mentioned at the start. So the second session in the series is the science of weight loss, and it is being held on Tuesday the 9th of March. So you can register for that one if you haven't already via our website, just clicking on the education tab, or just keep an eye out. I'll send it out again through our email distributions, including the flyer, which will have the link and all the information. So yeah, thank you again immensely to Claire and Rebecca, and we hope we see you at the next session. Have a safe evening. Good night.
I'm not backing down, 'cause the future is now. Not backing down, 'cause the future is now.